Rosie's on the homeowner's best friend.
Making our way through our topic today in the Outdoor Living Hour with Agriscaping. Gardening with elegance is the topic, and good to hear HOA isn't much of a deterrent in a lot of what you're covering, and it especially relates to growing edibles. But designing for sustainability, that it can be pretty easy to get motivated, get started, just because you want to get started.
Yeah, and when I'm talking sustainability in this case, we're not just talking about like an ecological, hug the earth kind of sustainability. We also want it sustainable for you as a homeowner maintaining your landscape. And to me, unsustainable is, like my side yard full of weeds that I have to go back out there and try to mow down and then mitigate that. That's not a sustainable elegance. So making an elegant garden sustainable is also respecting what my house and my soil and the relationship between those things and how they play out. Your HOA knows this as well. That's why, and they know it, but they don't fully understand how it works. So here's the scene. If you go driving down a neighborhood, nice HOA environment, and you're driving through there and the HOA is intentionally desert landscaping. And yet you're going to drive through and you're going to find a yard that's just loaded full of weeds. I mean, you can see them. They're overgrowing and it's like wildly crazy weeds and stuff like that. So that's an unsustainable desert landscape to keep it desert. Now, the reason it's unsustainable is because all the watershed off of the house, and this is going to happen, just mark my words, you're going to drive around in the next 3 weeks and you're going to find yards that are supposed to be desert and they're going to be loaded full of plants. And it's just growing wild in those spaces. And that's because the watershed off the house, the watershed off of the hardscapes that they have is shifting all that water into the smaller dirt spaces. So now instead of a regular desert landscape watering experience from nature, now they've got twice, sometimes 3, even 4 times as much water as they would normally get because of the watershed off of your roof. Now, it's unrealistic to try to expect a sustainable desert landscape in a scenario like that. And so respectfully, where I see weeds, I see opportunity to grow something a little more lush intentionally. And if I do that and I'm in advance of the rainstorm and I've got that watershed going off to my side yard that every time it rains, I'm going to have to go out there and mow all these weeds down and pull it all that. My HOA is going to get on my case. I want to respectfully acknowledge the fact I've got a more fertile environment than the desert landscape, would accommodate. And so I can actually plant better things. I can put a little bit more lush plants in those spaces that are going to soak up that excess water, deter any other weeds from forming. And so that's my first clue. If I'm going to walk out my yard, I'm going to look where the weeds are growing. And to make it sustainable, I'm going to plant where the weeds already grow, thereby replacing my weed pressure with now a fruiting fruit tree, perhaps, or a nice bush, or, like a natal plum, which is a good African adapted. Almost every HOA has that as an option. It's the natal plum or Natal plum. It's a bush plum. And if you get the right varieties like a Tomlinson or a Tuttle Eye, and they're combined together, they're going to actually cross-pollinate and create a wonderful fruit. Each fall and winter, you're going to have these wonderful bush plums that you can eat that taste like a candied cranberry without any added sweeteners or anything. They're amazing. I mean, we've been harvesting them from our Japanese section of the botanical garden this last 2 weeks. I think they're all harvested now, but, patrons have been able to come and taste that, and taste what it's like, see what they look like. But that's a good example of kind of creating a more sustainable, elegant design is respecting what nature is already trying to tell you. And that's, again, with offsetting weed pressures and available water sourcing. And so that's one way to look at it. Another thing for yourself is to acknowledge how much time do you want to spend in the garden? If I have, and this is some studies we've done dating all the way back to 2001, if I have a beautiful landscape, and we would test people on this, we'd give them a picture, we'd show them a farm, and we'd ask them the question, what do you think of this picture, this land? And they'll say, oh, that's beautiful. They like the nice row garden and stuff like that. It's beautiful. And we'd say, well, imagine if you owned it. And more than 65% of our respondents while we were doing this study came back with a response that was basically it was a burden, that they wouldn't want to own it. And then we asked them more questions, and basically what they came down to is that the majority of people, mass majority, they'd love to buy some produce from that farm, but they wouldn't want to own the farm. And that's because it's unsustainable from their perspective to own the place. It's a burden. Then we show them a beautiful manicured, hedgerows like we have in our English garden at the botanical garden. And we ask them the same questions. More than 65 of the respondents also thought it was beautiful, be willing to pay to go see it. But then when we asked them if they wanted to own it, no. It's a burden. It's unsustainable. And so we want to find that blend between elegance, optimal elegance, and a nature type scape. And that's going to be the right fit for you.
Rosie on the house, every Arizona homeowner's best friend.